Lovely. So for our second topic, I think this moves on sort of quite nicely from where we finished on the first part, was I suppose how surveying firms can help support people into the industry. So whether that's supporting graduates or people progressing through different routes or the apprenticeship schemes, how can surveying firms start to get involved if they're not already in helping people through?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say right at the outset would be some really good information about which qualifications or membership levels the firm supports. So whether that's associate, MRICS, in some other firms there might be qualifications even outside of RICS that are still relevant to surveyors. So some really good information about about what you can do and what you need to be able to do it. I think there's a very big drive and a real really a real importance on firms to train up counsellors to be available for candidates. The RICS do have an online counsellor module. I'd also advise that firms with counsellors, so um, those will need to be M or FRICS for the APC, or associate with a certain number of years experience, or M or F for the associate qualification, is actually to become assessors for RICS. And the more that the staff supporting candidates know about the qualification, they're actively involved in it, the better support and advice you'll be able to give to your team.
Yes.
Um, I think if you're a candidate, an employee, I th- one of the biggest barriers sometimes we find actually is candidates expecting to have their hands held through the qualifications, and whilst it might get you through university or certain courses, the APC or associate is such a self motivated and driven process that you've really got to get your mindset in the right place to be able to get through it and sustain that. When you're sitting there at 6 in the morning trying to revise, it's not because somebody at work's telling you to; it's because you really want to commit to that process. So I think firms educating candidates on, this is how we can support you, this is what you need to do, um, having really open lines of communication. So, if a candidate has something going on at home that's affecting their work or their APC, there needs to be that conversation, to help them through that, and not put people off the level of commitment and work that is needed to get there. So I suppose three things from that would be support, communication, and education. I think the three big ones for firms to do for candidates.
Interesting. So, okay, I've got a couple of questions from there then. So, if you're potentially maybe a sort of medium-ish to small firm, so you've got a few employees, are there, and you're looking to bring people on support people into the industry, are there frameworks that you can look at in terms of putting uh, content together, training content together to help people go through the process, and not in terms of obviously hand holding, but I think if you look at some of the bigger firms, then potentially they've obviously got um, you know training schemes that they've built to help bring people on and get through to whichever level of membership. Are there things, resources available to firms to be able to help set that up internally, or is it something they need to build themselves from scratch?
Um, the the RICS do have some resources available that firms could use to do that. Um, I, I suppose that there is a gap in the information available, and having the right people to provide the support. I guess in a way that's where firms like Property Elite do get brought in.
Yeah.
Um, so the types of things that firms need to think about. So a candidate working up to putting their submission together, they need a counsellor. They need a meeting at least probably an hour every 3 months, ideally more frequently than that. So, for example, we might go into a firm and provide that mentoring session Sometimes it can be for a group of people. Sometimes, ideally, it's one-on-one.
Yeah.
The next three things that I say firms definitely need to do. So, candidate puts their submission together. They need somebody to review that, and then as counsellor, it'd be signed off. Sometimes having somebody completely independent can actually be a really helpful tool for firms to say, here's the candidate, here's the submission, are they ready? And then actually they're kind of giving that responsibility for going, well, you know, you haven't quite done this, or you know, you need to do that. A bit like having an agent acting for you if you've got a property, that you can let them do the difficult bit almost,
Yeah. Yeah.
and smooth the way. So definitely somebody to be able to review the submission. And then the candidate ideally would need somebody who's an active assessor to run them through a mock interview, so they're really, really well prepared for the final assessment if they're an APC candidate. Firms can also do some really great work in supporting candidates with CPD. So lots of firms that we work with, either we go in and provide workshops on lots of different topics, or the firm organise them in-house. So perhaps if you've got a group of APC candidates or associate candidates, give each of them a different topic, and then they have to go away and research it and then present back to the group on that topic, which is a great way to practice presentation communication skills, but also obviously gives them quite a good amount of formal CPD on top of that. So that, I suppose, regular contact and regular dissemination of information, and just really hitting home, what makes a good submission, and how to go about writing up a good piece of work for your assessors. So I'd say something that's structured, regular, and has people with enough time to genuinely support candidates. Firms are so limited sometimes in the amount of time people have to do their own jobs, let alone support other people. So designating somebody with time and part of their job role for supporting candidates, I think, is really important as well.
Definitely. And I think my final question around this part, and I say this a lot, so it might not be, but is if you've just graduated, or you've qualified, might be the better word, at whatever level, potentially more so at the associate level. Are there ways, I suppose, as a surveying firm, you can help measure if you're giving someone the right level of work, in terms of better measure their competence, experience, and knowledge, and so on, to move from, say, let's say, take the level two, not level two, sorry, the residential market as an example, where it's appropriate to move from doing level 2 work to level 3 work, but also as a a new surveyor, is there a way of yourself measuring whether you feel the work you're being asked to do is appropriate, so you can feel confident about going out and doing it?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think at that initial point of doing anything new, you need to be supervised, and it needs somebody to review it, sign it off, talk you through, why did you apply that condition rating, why did you give that advice, and doing that a number of times to make sure that you're happy with, I suppose, the more standard properties that you might have in a level 2.
Yeah.
I think when you're looking at level 3s, I know that lots of associates go, well, I do level 2s, but I'm not ready to go out and do a level 3 yet. We've got a couple of candidates who qualified as associate, for example. They run their own firms, or they might be in firms doing level 2s. They've actually either got an instruction for a level 3 and gone, I want to work with somebody who's qualified. So they do it as a mentored, as a shadowed task. So somebody else is doing it, obviously, with their input. So, again, they'll accompany them on the inspection. They might draft the report. They'll discuss the findings. If you're employed in a firm and you think, I've done lots of level 2s, and actually I want to expand into level 3s, I think stick your hand up and say, well, again, can I go out with somebody and just watch what happens? And the more that you shadow, the more that you then get involved with the drafting, the advice. Eventually, you'll get to a point where somebody looks at your report and there's no red pen, and that, by that time,
Mm.
realistically, you know that you're ready. And I suppose with any of us, I certainly know in what I do, sometimes I come across something I've never come across before, and it's always a case of just learning more. And if you're not sure, ask somebody who, just ask somebody who does. There's no shame in asking for advice. And the absolute worst thing you could do is just to try and wing it,
Yes.
because that is where claims claims come from. So yeah, absolutely, working with somebody else who knows what they're doing is the best way to then build your own competence to a level that that you can go and do that solo.
That's sparked my something in my head from things I've seen online actually around that shadowing aspect. Are there things that surveying firms need to consider if they allow someone to shadow them? Because I suppose where I'm coming from with that is I see I fear, I suppose, that if you allow someone to shadow you, potentially there's a GDPR issue, whether it's the customer that was wanting the survey or the vendor that's whose house you're going into, or property you're going into, whatever it might be. Is that a valid fear? Actually, is it okay just to have someone come and shadow you, or do you just need to get a confidentiality uh, agreement signed just to say you won't share any personal data anywhere? Other
Mm.
That's the one I see come up a lot.
Yeah, I always think this is quite similar to if you go to the doctor and there's a trainee nurse or a trainee doctor. Before you go in, and somebody says to you, "Do you mind if X, my trainee, sits in on it?" And if you say no, they don't. If you say yes, they're there. So I think from my perspective, if you do if you do want to bring um, a trainee, I think number one, it depends if they're already employed by your business. If it's if it's your junior surveyor, if it's somebody on the team, I can't see any problem with that they come along with you. Obviously, because that's just the course of providing the instruction, and obviously they're fully supervised at all times.
Yes.
I think where it's mentoring and it's somebody not in your firm, it's not somebody who's got a contract of employment. I think certainly something on confidentiality, so some form of could be a non-disclosure agreement that that information stays with them. But I also think it's important for the firm to tell the client that there'll be somebody accompanying them. The client might go, not bothered, fine. But if something did happen on that inspection, I don't know, something gets left open, something gets broken, there is, an incident that happens. I think 100% firms need to cover themselves by telling the client, this is what's going to happen. This is X. They're
Yeah.
learning to be a surveyor and they're going to be with me. And if the client says no, it's black and white that they don't come on that particular inspection.
Yeah, yeah, because it's good to hear. Because I think it was, it's unfortunate if people can't come on inspections and shadow for that sort of confidentiality fear. Because I think there are ways around it, like you've mentioned, around just getting an NDA signed or something that shows that you've considered the confidentiality of data. Because otherwise, it's very difficult for people to go and get experience in shadow and so on.
Yeah, definitely. It's no, where I've worked previously, we've had, for example, graduates coming on work experience, and they've accompanied us on all types of different inspections, projects, whatever it is. But they do have a contract for that period of work that will set out things like confidentiality, etc. So it
Yeah.
could be that firms are looking at uh, having people coming to do mentoring opportunities. Maybe just speak to an HR or a legal specialist for some sort of wording to use for
Yeah.
those situations.
Awesome. So before we move on to the final topic around sort of preparing for different routes, is there any final advice you might have for surveying firms in terms of things to consider?
Sure. So I'd say the two main things would be getting some advice on any candidates that you're not sure if they are best placed to look at associate or MRICS, and then that advice leading on to which route route into either of those qualifications would be most appropriate. Quite often I see candidates on the wrong route that's just causing them a lot more of a headache, and there could be a much simpler way for them to get qualified. I also think just being open to the idea of degree apprenticeships and the fact that they can be quite cost effective for firms, and they can really help to develop candidates. So just being aware that those are out there and a brilliant option for developing staff.